Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Yates. I'm the music director and the conductor of the principal orchestra at Norwalk Youth Symphony. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion about the audition process that we have for our organization. I'm just going to take a second to introduce everybody on the call. Let's start with maybe I'll go in counterclockwise. I have Sarah Watkins, who is the executive director to my left. Below that is Stephen Huang. He's the conductor of our concert orchestra. Below that, we have Jessica McNamara. She's the conductor of our Philharmonia strings. Then next to her, we have Barry Zhao. He's the conductor of our Philharmonia winds. And above that, we have Aaron LaFaro, conductor of our prelude strings. Before we get into the specifics of auditioning, we thought we would take a moment to have each conductor tell you a little bit about their orchestra, about the skill set that usually the kids have at at the level of their orchestra, and just to give you a little bit of sense of what's going on in each ensemble. Why don't we actually start with Aaron, since he conducts our youngest string players. Aaron, do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Sure. So Prelude is the entry-level string orchestra at NYS. And basically, I think a good starting point for violins is just to have a good handle on at least one octave, two octave major scale. First violin should be able to shift into third position and with ease, either in the scale or in their repertoire. Second violin is more like late book Suzuki Book One, Book Two. Same thing with viola. Cello is more Suzuki Book Two, Book Three, and we would love bass players. We have not had a bass player in a while, so we would love uh, that if you know of anybody looking for a bass playing opportunity. But we have a lot of fun. We play a lot of different repertoire. Um, and it's a good ensemble just to kind of really build some ensemble skills and prepares you for the next level up, which is Mrs. McNamara.
So, Jessica, would you like to go ahead and speak a little bit about your ensemble?
Sure. So I conduct the Philharmonia String Ensemble. We are the second of the four tiers of orchestras. And so we kind of take about the level that Aaron finished talking about. Again, for violins, probably around the Suzuki Book 4-5 level. And for any parents that are watching, we're giving these levels associated with Suzuki books just because it's a standard kind of leveled repertoire, but it certainly does not have to be from any of those books. We're really just looking for pieces that are appropriate and for their level and for their instrument chosen by their teacher. But just to give you a sense. And similar for cello and viola is like usually about book 3-4 level. And we play also string orchestra music in our orchestra, but we then also combine with the Philharmonia winds, usually once or twice a year. So the kids start to get a full orchestra, symphonic orchestra experience, which is really special and fun. And that's all I have for now.
Jessica, do you want to maybe give some examples of some kind of pieces that you play?
Sure. Yeah, so we do various things from some unarranged things, like we've done movements out of like the Holst Brook Suite, Brook Green Suite, some uh, pieces that are written for kind of like grade 3-4 level orchestra music. And then we also do a lot of really wonderful arrangements that are we've done symphony, Dvorak Symphony 8, a movement of that, like you might hear, principal orchestra play, but we'll do a string orchestra arrangement of it. Or, Eine kleine Nachtmusik, we've done things like that, but at an appropriate level where, it's very challenging for the kids, but also accessible and making them feel really successful over the course of the semester.
Nice. And something Jessica often does too is she has her kids play without conductor and lead themselves, which is something that I know the kids really get a thrill out of, and it's exciting for everyone
Yeah.
in the audience too.
Yeah, we often
It
start
really
the year off that way with one piece without a conductor, just to kind of get the ensemble to really get to know each other and to focus on how to be an ensemble.
really teaches them about leadership too. So she collaborates when they do. Jessica was talking about bringing the two ensembles together. The person she collaborates with is, of course, Barry Zhao, who's our conductor, Philharmonia Winds. Barry, you want to tell us a little bit about your ensemble and the level of playing that kids can expect?
Hi everyone. So I'm Barry. I'm the conductor of the Philharmonia Winds. I work very closely with Ms. McNamara and to combine our two groups. Every year we do it like once or twice, and that's always a fun part of our ensemble. As far as leveling goes, in the winds world, our leveling is a lot less standardized. So I would say a good way to think about it is we're looking for kids who are studying with a private lesson teacher, who are just interested in an experience greater than your average public school ensemble, right? As if you're that type of person, then Phil Wins is at the very least the right spot for you, if not, concert or principal. The goal in my ensemble, and I'm sure with Miss McNamara's, is to give the kids an ensemble experience that helps them move up to the concert orchestra. So in the Phil Wins world, we'll play chorales, we'll play pieces out of the standard repertoire of the wind band literature. We'll also do a lot of arrangements, right? So, for example, we've done some Brahms, right? We've done some Copland. All this to say that the main goal for all of the students in my group is have a great time in the year or two that they're with me, and then help them progress on to that next level. And one of the joys of that, as we spoke in the beginning, is combining, right? So we, instead of starting kids off with a full orchestra experience right off the bat, we work with them in a wind ensemble to help them learn all the parts, get everything down technically, and then combine with the full orchestra. Because sometimes the full orchestra experience right off the bat can be quite challenging for students in a group of 80 people where they're expected to play a solo. It can be quite challenging for some of our younger players. So we kind of build everyone up so that by the time that they're ready for concert orchestra, they've done it before and they're ready to just thrive.
That's great, Barry. Thank you so much. And then when the kids do move up from the Philharmonia experience, they are ready for our concert orchestra conducted by Stephen Wong. So Steve, tell us a little bit about your ensemble, please.
Sure thing. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, John. The concert orchestra is one of the larger groups. We have about between 50 to 75 students. Generally, the population of the students falls, the majority of the bell curve is high school and junior high students. And this is the first chance for strings and winds to play continuously together. And we're playing almost predominantly what we call the standard repertoire for orchestra. What that means is stuff that is not arrangements, stuff that major symphony orchestras play. And we are looking at pieces and works that are on, of course, the easier side to introduce that to the students, and really getting students really learning the orchestral tradition. And that might mean for the strings, of course, to continue the progress playing in the sections, and for the section leaders to learn how to be good leaders, and for everybody to learn how to be good leaders. And particularly for the winds, it's really interesting because this is really one of the chances that continues, of course, what Mr. Zhao does, understanding that the wind role is really one of a lot of solos oftentimes. And that's a big challenge for winds, especially young winds, to do that. So my group, basically, many students do progress to the principal orchestra, and many stay in this orchestra as well. Those who are interested in touring can come from both groups, so that they're both invited. So they have that opportunity as well. I really enjoy, the best part of my job, I think, is to see the vast amount of growth from students who come into this orchestra because they're looking at music written by Beethoven, original music by Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Tchaikovsky, and they're really sinking their teeth into this music, that wonderful music that was written hundreds of years ago, oftentimes. And that's really exciting to students to be able to do that.
Nice, thanks. And as I said before, I'm Jonathan Yates. I conduct the principal orchestra, which is the top ensemble of the organization. And we do big repertoire. We do the big stuff. So for example, this year we're going to do Tchaikovsky Fifth Symphony, Beethoven Fifth Symphony, the stuff that the kids can really sink their teeth into. And it's so exciting watching the kids progress from prelude up through Philharmonia, up through concert. We take it very seriously, your students' progress as they go from ensemble to ensemble, and we're really watching over them so that then they can have a successful experience at the end with principal orchestra. In terms of the solo repertoire that the kids are playing to get into principal, by that point it's concerti, sonatas, advanced repertoire, and then they can they really flourish. I think, Sarah, are there anything that you think that we need to address about the specific ensembles, or if not, maybe we'll move on to Stephen.
The only thing I would add is, aside from our 3 regular concerts at Norwalk City Hall, concert in principal this year, or this season, we'll have the opportunity to perform in Turin, France. And principal orchestra will perform at Carnegie Hall in June, a concert we've done every 3 years since 1993.
We're really excited about both. And our tours they're incredible experiences for the kids. They get so much out of it, from the concerts, from the cultural experiences, the food, the friendships they make. We love it. And we haven't gone to France in a very long time. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, okay, I'm gonna hand it over to Stephen now, who's going to speak a little bit about what to expect in our audition process.
Great, thank you, John. I'm going to share my screen. My very messy desktop will show up, the picture of my 2 kids. Just give me a second. Oh. I hope you all can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay. What I would like to speak briefly about is what you will expect to experience at our annual Norwalk Youth Symphony audition. Obviously, this is something that a lot of people can feel very stressful about, and we want to be sure to go over it and certainly have time for your questions later on during this webinar to answer your questions. So let's just start with this. There's an overview here. I've linked the overview word with our website at Norwalk Youth Symphony under the auditions tab. This is just a general idea of the things that each of the ensembles are expecting to do. The first thing for the parents is just to remember some of the little bit of the administrative stuff. If you can bring a headshot, fill out the form on the website, and there's a registration fee, and then to arrive early at the audition. Every audition will start with a scale. I looked through the requirements, and generally speaking, we are looking for something in the range of a quarter note equals 60. If you don't know what that is, your kid probably does. Set the metronome to 60, and then, if possible, 4 slurred eighth notes. 4 notes to a bow would be appropriate for the strings, and for the winds, any articulation. I think the articulation is not mentioned about what they need to do. And then after the scale, then they would prepare either 1 or 2 prepared pieces, depending on their group. It's great if you can bring a copy of your music. especially because if it's a piece that the judges may not know, it's important for us to refer to it so that we can get good feedback to you as well. I don't remember what our website says. Usually, if we have just one for us to share, that's generally enough for one for the table for the judges. If you want to save on some photocopying, that would be great. And then one, if you most likely will be using your own music, then of course that one you need to bring. And then there's the dreaded sight reading portion. And there is sight reading in all parts. I'm sure there will be questions about sight reading later, but just take a look at this this table here. And I think you can kind of see what our expectations are. As Aaron said, the prelude strings, string students that are comfortable in first position, starting to work into some third position, fourth position stuff. That's where we're basically looking at. And then in the strings, the Philharmonia strings are really showing more comfort in the other positions for those string players. In the winds, all those instruments are very different. We're looking for ability to play an octave of a major scale. And then in the concert and principal orchestras, we're asking our auditioning students to play multiple octaves. That's quite important. And then also important are two contrasting selections. And I'll talk a little bit about those a little bit later as well. The sight reading you can expect for the prelude strings, we're just double checking that the students aren't primarily learning by ear, that they have some capability, hopefully with reading written notation. All of the sight reading, as far as I can understand, is going to be pretty basic in first position. In the fill strings, they may expect key signatures of 3 flats or 3 sharps at the very most. And ideally, but not always, if there might be some positional work there. But we're just really trying to challenge the students to see where they are. And then from the concert orchestra and principal orchestra, John and I pull our sight reading from typical pieces that we might play in the future. And so we find something that's appropriate for them. So they might be looking at excerpts from those pieces that John was talking about. That's an idea. So what are the evaluators looking for? This actually is really my idea of what I do. I can surmise that my colleagues do basically the same thing. Because many times, of course, a student comes in, they just want to play their best. And of course, that's what we want them to do too. But what are we looking for is that we're really trying to figure out whether the students can handle the technical capabilities that the music's going to demand of them. And then we're also evaluating what they are, where they are in their journey for musical maturity. And we look at these two, of course, very related things, but we also try to identify things that are specific to, for example, technique. For example, if a string student is just getting the ability to play off the string, that's important for us to know whether that student can do that. Or if a wind student is just beginning to play into their upper registers, that's important for us to know. Or they can read a separate clef, or they can read a transposition that the repertoire needs. That's important for us to know as well. So when we're looking for, what we're looking for when we're evaluating these students is, number one, for me, the most important thing is those two things, is what's the best ensemble that the student can fit into. Then for me, what I think about is where will the student gain the most? Where is that student going to be able to learn the most as well? It's really focused on that individual student. Then there's the reality of what are the ensemble needs. In other words, if there are a whole bunch of an instrument, there may be a situation where we need to figure out where that natural break is in order to assign the student to the right place. That is, for me and for us, I believe, the least important thing. The most important thing is what's the right place for the student. So here are two kind of equal and complementary areas that I gave as examples of what technical capabilities might mean, right? So for the strings, it's, do they have the technique to left hand move into various positions and to play with different types of bowings? And for the winds, it's do they know the fingerings and the ability to play in various registers, as well as to perform particular articulations as well. I didn't mention other things, for example, the ability to play certain dynamics, which can be very challenging for all instruments, but particularly wind instruments. So the things we're looking for are examples is when somebody plays a scale or the piece, we're looking at whether or not they're comfortable using upper positions, whether their fingerings are consistent and correct. When they're playing well, for example, when winds are playing their piece, whether or not they're managing their breath appropriately, what is the style of the articulations? Are the articulations clean? Are the articulations considered and thought about? And how do notes end as well? The sight reading, I use that to evaluate technical capabilities as well, which is to say that can they also still demonstrate the same things when there's new music in front of them? And then for the wind sight readings, for example, whether or not they look at a particular note, particular key signature, and they can understand where that note might be on their instrument. That's kind of important. I would say the sight reading for me might be more towards the musical maturity, for me to evaluate whether the student feels comfortable with a variety of different rhythms and pitches. So let me move to the right side really quickly. I listed a couple of things here. Musical maturity for me means whether the student understands music as a language that has kind of a cadence and a phrase, and whether they can apply those elements of music to be able to really say something that's meaningful to that student, to that musician, and meaningful to us. So that's a lot of kind of brainy stuff as opposed to performance stuff. Is the student have a good sense of rhythm and meter? Does the student have a good understanding of pitch and intonation? Does a student have a good idea of the sound that they make with their instruments and their articulation choices? And then can the student have a good idea about dynamics and how they can use dynamics to phrase what they're playing? So again, these two things are related, these two areas are related, but I try to evaluate these kind of separately when I'm making my evaluation. So here are some frequently asked questions, I think, and maybe some examples. You might ask who the judges are. The judges are certainly the conductors in the ensembles, oftentimes more than one. If there's a choice, perhaps where the student may fall between two groups. And then we do call in instrumental specialists as needed. The question for some students is whether or not they should memorize their piece. And that's a decision for the teacher and the student to make. Generally, the short answer, I said it depends, that's the shortest answer. But I find that if it is memorized, oftentimes students can be more dedicated to the performance of the piece. But sometimes, of course, students might get a little bit nervous. I would say that if they haven't done this memorized, if they haven't performed it memorized, it may be better just to do it, their audition with the music. But if they've performed it several times or auditioned several times with it memorized, then they should go ahead and do that. Another question that people have is whether they should choose the most difficult piece or the most prepared piece. And I think Mr. Zhao will talk more about this, but we believe that generally we think the most prepared. In fact, for students who are playing big concertos, for example, you may consider that we don't necessarily need to hear the most difficult virtuoso passages necessarily. For example, for me, the technical needs for people to play certain orchestra pieces may not require them to play, the most difficult stuff in their solo stuff. So that I don't really need to hear whether they can do that. But if they are working on those difficult pieces, it does show their musical maturity, perhaps. So that's really something to consider, is that that I don't really need to hear those really, really difficult passages if they're just not ready yet to be performed. Sometimes students bring in some music from their school, like their school parts. And that's not really a great way for us to evaluate the students, because oftentimes their parts are kind of piecemeal and they don't really play a full phrase or a full section or full part of the music. So we can't really get a sense of, we might get a sense of their technique, but not really of their musical maturity. So it's really important that they play music, they make that choice with their teacher. Oftentimes it's better to play an etude or another solo piece. How about the contrast of the pieces? It's not just fast and slow. Ideally, it should be from two different composers. Ideally, it should be from two different time periods or two different styles. And again, if you think about the technical capabilities that the judges may be looking for, we're trying to evaluate, can the student play short staccato notes? Can the student play slow legato notes as well? Or fast legato notes? That's another thing that we might be interested in. And then one thing that I wanted to add is that, of course, all students tend to start from the beginning, and that's A-okay with us. It's no problem at all. But you may make a very clever decision. You say, okay, I'm going to skip that first page and play from the middle. And that's perfectly fine with us. That's okay. We do like to think that the students are preparing the whole selection, so we may ask them to jump to a certain part of that music. Ideally, that student will be prepared to play that part. If the whole piece is not ready yet, or the whole movement's not ready yet, you can go ahead and let us know. These are some unexpected things that I think may happen. Perhaps. I promise you all the judges will smile when you come into the door. But we may not talk a lot because we're on a tight schedule. We're trying to move through a lot of students and evaluate them in a very short amount of time. So expect us to smile, to greet you, and then we'll go right to business. And then you can announce your scale and your selections. I forgot to add, you will give us your headshots, or they will be provided to us, and your copy of the music. Sometimes you may, don't be surprised if the judges may interrupt you, perhaps to start something over again or to do something else a little bit differently. That's very, very normal. That does not mean anything about how you're doing. The sight reading, I promised I would get to this. Here's a little bit of a hint. I find that success is that when you look at sight reading is to first work out the rhythm. You might want to try singing it to yourself, at least to rhythm. Then think about the pitches and then everything else after that. The judges will give you a suggested tempo, but if it's a little slower than that, that's perfectly fine. And finally, we all know that auditions are very stressful. So do prepare as well as you can, but don't be too hard on yourself, because in the stressful situations, every time you're not going to be 100%. Don't expect 100%. If you get 100%, that's great. If you get 90%, that's great. But every stressful challenge is always a great learning moment. So even if you think, well, that just didn't go that well, wait a little bit, give yourself a treat and figure out how you might do better the next time. These are some final things I wanted to say. The Norwalk Youth Symphony, it's a great organization. We really, really care about every student, and we try to listen with the best of our ears and our brains to figure out the best place for the student. Sometimes students don't do well in their auditions. In fact, again, like I said, you don't expect yourself to do 100%. Even so, we almost always can discern your general skill level. So don't worry too much about that. Oftentimes, really polished auditions, of course, is what we want to aim for. And those oftentimes we can use to try to evaluate some leadership positions in an assigned ensemble. And then we do our best to take copious notes about the auditions so that we can get some feedback to you if you so want it. And that's all I have to say for what you might expect at the auditions, and I'll eagerly wait your questions a little bit later. I will put this slide deck in the chat if I can find it. Thank you very much.
Stephen, thank you so much. Yeah, and to add to what Stephen said, or follow up rather, he mentioned about questions and answers. I already see a question in the Q&A. Please do be encouraged to go ahead and put your questions in there. Mostly we will, I think we'll answer them when we're all done. I would just quickly say, I see Eleanor Schiff's question about how many kids are accepted into each orchestra. We really are, as Stephen said, our first priority is to place kids according to their level. I mean, once in a long while it gets complicated when, we get really overextended with, the flutes and principal orchestra or something like that. But even in that sort of situation, there are no set number of places for orchestra. I just want to make that clear that that if there's a way, if your kid is playing at a concert orchestra level on any instrument, we are gonna, do our absolute best to make sure that they get to do that. And it's in very rare occasions that for some reason that doesn't happen. But really, again, it shouldn't be a concern that there are only a certain number of spots for new students. It's not the way that we think about it. So, but thank you very much for your question. And Eleanor, if you feel that didn't answer your question adequately, just let me know. So I'm gonna hand it over to Barry now, and he's gonna talk about how to prepare for a successful audition rather. Sorry.
Hi everyone, just give me a quick second as I get my slide deck ready to go. So like Jonathan said, I'm going to be talking about preparing for the audition itself. I second pretty much everything he's just spoken about in terms of, like the technical preparation of the music itself. But there are also a lot of different considerations for the audition that some people might not think about. So just want to reiterate that choosing repertoire is very important, right? You do want to consult with your lesson teacher and choose standard solo literature. And you want to make sure that repertoire represents your talent well, all stuff that Stephen just covered. But I would also like to add that for any students who are kind of at that Philharmonia concert level, to be very sure about the audition requirements. In years past, there have been some students who have been eagerly excited to audition for concert orchestra only to find out that their audition didn't meet the requirements, and which left them ineligible for consideration. So if that is you, just be aware that the Philharmonia and the Prelude level generally requires one piece for your audition, and the concert and principal requires two contrasting pieces. Okay, so just please be sure about that. Preparing for your audition. So, along with being the conductor at the Norwalk Youth Symphony, I'm also the high school band director at New Canaan High School. And each year in both the organizations, I have tons of students who are auditioning for this, that, and the other. And so a couple, just tips on how to be the most successful and how to prepare the most successful way. Of course you should practice. I think this is just, at this point we can probably just assume this, and practicing in the way that Stephen described is the most effective, right? Thinking about music in those terms, the musical maturity and the technical ability. But on top of playing music, we're auditioning. So the best way to get good at auditioning is to audition, right? There have been, I can't tell you how many students that have walked into my room when I've been judging, and I hear them perform, and the audition goes one way, and then a few weeks later I hear them in a more organic, natural setting, and I'm blown away by what they can do, right? So what that tells me is, like everyone, we can probably expect to perform about 80% of what we're capable of in a relaxed environment when we're in the audition. Just the pressure and the nerves kind of get to us all. And of course we want to maximize that. So what we do to maximize that is just audition, audition, audition. Pull your parents, grandparents, siblings, play for them. Make videos, right? You don't even have to post them. Just the act of making a recording and listening to it again will kind of put you in that space of auditioning, right? Find ways to make yourself uncomfortable, right? Instead of starting at the beginning every time when you're preparing your piece, start, midway through, start at the end, choose different prepare like a small range of tempo, like maybe 160 BPM, 155, 168, like a small range so that you can have that flexibility so that in case during your audition, if you happen to rush a little bit or you happen to drag a little bit, you're a little bit more prepared, right? And the last thing is I want to try to encourage everybody to think about practicing everything that goes into an audition process, right? So for my students, I get a little crazy with it, and they let me know, but I have my students practice like how to turn the page, right? Walking into a room and getting set up and even like slowing down before you start playing. And the reason I ask my students to practice that part of the process is as a judge for auditions, I've listened to countless students who I know for a fact are very, very talented, but they walk into a room and the pressure gets to them and they come in a little bit frazzled. So the start of their audition, is a little bit shaky, right? Because the that beginning part isn't routine. If we practice walking into a room, getting set up, you know, checking our instrument one final time, taking a deep breath, and we make that part of a routine during the day of the audition, it just, goes smoothly. Okay, so I'd like to encourage everyone to practice everything. My colleague will speak a little bit more about this later. But you also want to practice along with practicing everything. You also want to start thinking about the day of, right? So just very lightly, without stepping on his toes, think about the timing. Brass players, in particular, please make sure you have a plan for exactly how long you're going to warm up. I've noticed that in the past, I've had many, many times.
So Barry has been was having some internet issues earlier, and I can see that he's frozen. Maybe we will move on
Yes, I think Aaron has a lot of this prepared.
yeah. So why don't we?
So let me unshare.
Okay, let's move on to Aaron, who's going to speak to what else to do on the day of the audition.
Hi, everybody. So one of the things I always tell my orchestra students and my private students, in the nicest way possible, but it's useful, that proper preparation prevents poor performance. So Barry talked quite a bit about preparation for the audition itself, the music side of it. The day of the audition can be nerve-wracking, but I think it starts with a good night's sleep. That's often very underrated, but it's extremely valuable. I know it affects my children greatly. So making sure they get a good night's sleep, the night before, huge. Eating a healthy meal or something, light, not too crazy. Avoiding sugar, avoiding caffeine for the older kids. Drinking water, not too much. Minimizing screen time. I find that too much of it can not really yield the best results. We want to try and your children are working so hard towards this state, and to try to make really put together a quality audition. So it's good to just try to minimize the screen time, maybe read a book or something. Definitely maybe warm up before you leave the house a little bit. Get for the string players especially, just get your fingers going, and um, you can run through the audition if you want to. I wouldn't spend a ton of time doing that, but just something that so you feel good and you have some confidence, before you get in the car. And then arrive 20 minutes early to check in. There's nothing more anxiety producing, because we want to mitigate or minimize the amount of anxiety than running late and then feeling rushed and all that, take the time that you were assigned, try to get there 20 minutes early and take all the time that you need, or that 20 minutes before is probably pretty good. And then minimize talking to others. You know, you might see a friend or whatever, and that's okay. But try to stay focused on really doing the best job that you can do. Um, Again, you've worked so hard, spent all that time preparing, so you want to do the best job you possibly can. That's it for me.
Great. Barry, is there anything you feel that you missed, or can we move on to Jessica?
Sounds good. It was a great natural segue. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, great, fantastic. So Jessica is going to speak to us now about what parents can do to help their child, as well as discussing audition results with your child afterwards.
And I have the fortunate spot here of going last. So I jotted down just one or two things that I wanted to add to a few different categories of my predecessor colleagues here. So one thing is what to wear to an audition. Just a tip that it is a really good opportunity for your child to practice dressing professionally, and just putting their best foot forward in that setting. So we don't have a set thing that we are looking for them to wear, but it's a really great opportunity. Think about it like prepping for a job interview down the road, right? It's a great time for them to practice wearing something presentable, appropriate for an audition. Another thing that I wanted to mention is Stephen touched on really playing with musicality. And I just want to emphasize that one more time, because I think that as students and even private teachers, we really focus a lot on the technical and getting them prepared, which of course is completely necessary. But the musicality is just what makes it on the day of. So really preparing them to play as musically as they possibly can is a huge part of a successful audition. And then lastly, I wanted to add in the warm-up room, I think Barry had this on his slide, but we didn't get to mention it. It's important for your kids to know that they're going to be with other children in the warm-up room. That can mentally throw kids if they don't know that ahead of time. And that they will also be playing also in the room, right? So they're going to hear other kids playing, and that can sometimes be intimidating. So just, talking that through with your child ahead of time, that you're going to hear other kids, you're going to hear kids who are older than you, younger than you, playing for a different amount of times than you, and it is not a comparison, and to do your very best to just block it out. If you have a sensory sensitive kiddo, and they actually would want to wear, those kind of headphones or something like that in the audition room, if that wouldn't mess them up for their own warm-up, sorry, not audition room, in the warm-up room, that could be something they could try too. And lastly, for the warm-up room, something that I think is very valuable with their private teacher is to actually talk about what they will do in that 10-minute warm-up. Sometimes kids, especially younger ones, get in and they're like, I don't really know what I should warm up. You know what I mean? So just having that conversation with their private teacher ahead of time of what will a warm-up look like? What will be most helpful to you? Is that playing through your hardest passages? Maybe not. So just talking through that with the private teacher. Okay, now on to my actual assigned topic, which is parents. So I am the parent of a 14-year-old violinist who is in principal orchestra and an 11-year-old cellist who was in Philharmonia last year. So I've gone through my fair share of parent side of auditions, not only for NYS, but other things as well. So I wanted to start by sharing a little story from my own childhood, very brief, 30-second story. I grew up with a mom who was not a musician at all, but who tremendously supported me in everything. And we would show up to auditions for whatever it was, youth symphony, regionals, etc. And I would be totally chill. Like, I was not nervous. And my mom, with all of the best intentions, was like, what do you need? Did you warm up this? Are you? And she wasn't an overbearing, like wanting me to get into the top anything. She just cared for me. And she just, but she made me so nervous. So Just a thought, parents, be really aware of yourself and your affect and everything about yourself going into the audition day, because how you are really affects your kids. So everything from, as best as you can, really saving enough time to get there, thinking about traffic, and you being as calm and supportive of whatever it is that they need. They might be cool as a cucumber and not feel nervous, and then awesome, you can kind of roll with that. They might be a basket case, and then that's your time to be the sturdy rock for them. I don't get to see anybody's faces, but I would ask for a show of hands. I'm wondering how many parents know Dr. Becky from, she's the author of Good Inside. She is absolutely phenomenal. If you don't know her, I highly recommend reading her book and or following her on Instagram. But she has a phenomenal analogy that I think is amazing for parenting, which is that parents are essentially like a pilot. She talks about how, you know, there's very few times as an adult that we don't have control, right? Like we generally have control over something in most parts of our lives as an adult. However, children really don't. They are, I mean, especially young children, they're entirely entrusting themselves to us. And if you think of the analogy of a pilot, when we board a plane as adults, that's one of the only times where we are totally putting our safety and our life in the hands of that pilot, right? And if you think about, if there was turbulence, what would make you feel the most comfortable as a passenger on that plane? If the pilot got on there and was like, okay, guys, you know, I hear you guys all screaming out there and you're making me kind of nervous, so I'm going to ask you to stop, right? If the pilot started getting worked up, that would not at all be comforting to us as passengers on the plane. But if the pilot came to us, as they typically do, thank goodness, and they say, you know, I want you to know there's going to be turbulence coming up. So they're thinking ahead and they are calm and they're like, we've got this under control. You know, it's going to be 10 minutes of turbulence and we're going to be okay. So that's, I think, our job as parents when our kids do get, you know, worked up, is to be there for them in the way that they need and hopefully be their kind of sturdy pilot. Let's see here. I had a few other notes to myself. If they are short with you and snap at you and, you know, all those things, or even blame you. I've also had this, which was super fun. I didn't want to do this to begin with. You forced me to do this, right? And then you're like, did I? You know, you like question all your parenting life choices. So if that all starts to happen, just, you know, again, sturdy pilot, right? Just, you know, be there for them and know actually you didn't force them, most likely. I'm sure you probably didn't. And they're just letting their nerves come out and you're their safe person. So don't take it personally. And then finally shifting over to discussing audition results with your kids. So some kids are going to find out their audition result and they're going to be thrilled and they're going to have gotten into the group that they were wanting to get into. And that's amazing. And that's a great time as a parent to be, you know, really supportive and make those connections to them of all of this hard work and this effort and this passion. This is so awesome. It's paying off for you, right? And really make the connection from hard work to product. But that's not going to be every case, right? There's going to be times when they were hoping to move up and they're not moving up, or you know, situations like that. And so I wanted to just touch on that as well. I think one of the healthiest things that we can start to think of as musicians and parents of musicians is focusing on the process over the product, and really just acknowledging all of the hard work that has gone into this, and that is never, ever a waste, no matter what. That this amazing hard work is so, you have become a better musician. You are, you know, that I think is so important for kids to understand, that it's not just about the end result, but it is truly the process. And that only goes so far, right? They also, they can still feel disappointed. So also I want to mention, to thinking about that they may not realize that there are tremendous benefits to being the big fish in the pond and the little fish. So meaning if you do move up into a more challenging orchestra, you're then you're in the position of you're surrounded by people who are at a higher level than you, and you're really working to keep up with them, which is phenomenal and really good for you. But there's also a lot to be said for being one of the stronger students in a group. And that is, first of all, a very meaningful position. We absolutely need those players and we rely on those players deeply. It's also really important as a musician to develop your confidence, to develop your leadership skills, and all of that. So helping them to see all of those sides, and that it's not just this race up to principal, I think is important. And finally, when I teach parents of a lot of young children in my private studio, and when I ask parents at the outset, when they're first enrolling their child in violin lessons, why did you want your child to play the violin? So many times they will say, I want them to learn grit, perseverance, hard work, how to handle challenges. Well, these are those moments. These are the moments when they do face a disappointment. These are the moments that we as parents want them to learn, right? Okay, how do I take this information? I didn't get what I was hoping for this time. And what do I do with that? What do I do in my practices? Am I still going to only practice once or twice a week? Or is this the year that I'm going to start to practice a lot, right? And really change. And, what do I do with that information? That's what develops the grit and the perseverance that we as musicians get to. Okay, so those are some thoughts on parenting and parenting musicians in auditions.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Before we move on to the questions, a final thought. And I hope this has come across throughout this webinar. We make every effort to make your kids feel just at ease, welcomed, happy in the audition process. We understand we have all auditioned ourselves at some point in our lives. Many of us many times for seating auditions, concerto competitions, whatever it is. We understand the stress. Our interest is in helping your kids thrive. And so we'll be there for if things go awry in auditions. We're understanding. We want the whole experience to be, again, as warm and as pleasant as possible. And that's something that's really kind of about the ethos of the organization that continues into the way we treat our rehearsals, the way we treat our concerts, that we're there for your kids to have a really, really good experience throughout. I would again encourage people, if you have any more questions, to type them into the Q&A right now, because we're probably here for another few minutes. Just looking back at some of the questions that we've answered already.
Jonathan?
Yes, please, Sarah, go ahead.
I just want to touch on two different topics before we do the Q&A. Stephen mentioned the photos, but we've gone to the new process. You should have sent a photo of your child in during the audition registration process, so the conductors will have those photos on hand. And secondly, we know we talked a lot about arriving 20 minutes early to warm up, get settled in, but we also know you can hit traffic, and we know that, leaving on 95 in the Merritt. So you should have our cell phone number, the Norwalk Youth Symphony phone number. It was on the letters, or I'll also send it out again before auditions. And so just send us a text or an email saying we've hit traffic, or we've had an experience where it was the first day of school. They didn't get off on the bus what they thought they would get off the bus. So just send us a text, let us know you're going to be late, and we will accommodate your child's audition time. We'll be flexible. Go ahead.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So we've responded to all of, I see actually there are some more questions. Just to quickly go back over some of these questions we've already answered. there was a question about whether there's movement between orchestras during the year. It's quite uncommon. Once in a while, we'll find that, oh, actually, maybe we should move this kid up, but it's quite rare. What is much more common, because Melissa Miller, I see, also asked about moving within the orchestras. And yes, we all rotate kids within the sections. I mean, we have principals who sometimes, will, in some cases, will be seated in their spot throughout the year, sometimes not, sometimes they rotate as well. But we think it's really important for the kids to have as diverse an experience of the orchestra as possible, sitting in the front of the section, sitting in the back of the section. We all rotate without exception so that the kids, have as full of an experience as possible with an orchestra.
Well, Jonathan, actually, Prelude, Fill Strings, and Concert will have seating auditions throughout the year.
Oh, thank you for mentioning that, Sarah. Yeah, so that's actually an even kind of more informed way for the kids to rotate throughout the year. So let's see, I just saw another new question. Oh, sorry, open. Sarah, do you want to speak to how and when audition results are shared with the families?
Okay, so every student that's registered has received a contact ID number. So we will post that on the website, and you will receive a email when it's ready, and it will just have your child's ID number and their orchestra placement, and that will typically go out Wednesday, September 4th. Or no, yeah, no, that's Tuesday, Thursday, September 4th.
Let me ask my colleagues, is there anything else you'd like to add that you feel that we've missed in this discussion? Anybody else?
Hi, this is Stephen here. I was just going to, first of all, echo a lot of what Jessica said about the dress. What a great thing to bring up. We see a lot of kids come through dressed in a lot of different ways. We understand that they're coming from another practice, for example. They have to be in their practice clothes. That's perfectly fine. Taking this opportunity for them to dress well will make this opportunity more meaningful for them as well. And I think that's a great idea. That's really fantastic. And the second thing I really wanted to echo what Jessica said was that, people learn a lot more through small failures or failures than from success. And it makes people more interesting when they are able to deal with that and evaluate, what they want to do to make it better and why they didn't succeed that time. And so parents, whatever you can do, of course, to encourage them to practice and be supportive, but really support those positive things that they can get out of disappointment, and say this is not the end of the road. This is just a time for you to learn. This is a great thing. I really was happy that Jessica mentioned that.
Yeah, the first time I applied to conducting school, I didn't get in anywhere.
Neither did I.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So but it is those experiences that really that build character. That said, we're rooting for your kids. We want them to have a great experience. We want them to have a great audition. Yeah, we're there. We're really there for them again to excel and to thrive. Anything else that anybody and the rest of you guys would like to add? Anything you think we've missed? Because we're just coming up on 8 o'clock at the moment, and I see there are no other questions that we haven't responded to. So no final thoughts from anyone else? Okay, so Sarah, unless you're welcome. Thank you. Sarah, unless there's anything else you'd like to add, I think we can probably call it a night.
And then, of course, you're welcome to email me or call with any questions you think of after this webinar is over.
Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time to support your kids this way. It shows that your devotion to your kids, that you're willing to listen to us for a full hour on a webinar. And we'll look forward to meeting your kids really soon. It's coming right up. So and thank you again to my colleagues for doing such a great job. So thanks, everybody. Have a good night.